Hello to everyone, and thank you for joining us. In this video, we'll be discussing the key takeaways of the BNamericas 2025 Oil and Gas Outlook Report, which is currently available to subscribers only on our website and mobile app. My name is Michael Place, and I'm joined by Alan Brown, Mark Beresford, João Montenegro, and David Casellas. How you doing, guys?
Good, thanks.
João, let's start with you in Brazil. What's on the radar for oil and gas in 2025 in Brazil?
Yeah, well, starting with exploration and production, the highlight, of course, as usual, is Petrobras with a $15 billion investment in this segment. It will be installing, deploying new FPSOs in the Mero and Búzios fields, but also private companies such as Brava Energia, which resulted from the merge between Enalta and 3R Petroleum, will be deploying finally the Atlanta field definitive production system. Shell might take the final, might make the final investment decision on the Gato do Mato pre-salt project. It's been delayed. Let's see if this time it will really happen. In the pipelines segment, the highlight is a project of a joint venture that Origem Energia and TAG. TAG is a company controlled by ENGIE, which operates over 4,000 kilometers of gas pipelines. They are set to invest over $200 million in a natural gas storage project, which is expected to give more flexibility for the sector in terms of gas supply. Also in the gas area, but looking at LNG, there's a project, we have published a story about this on our website. LC Terminais Portuários of the Lyon Capital Group is planning to build a regasification terminal in Maranhão State with an estimated capex of 550 million reais, around $100 million. It's already begun the environmental licensing process. Looking at the downstream, Petrobras is expected to move forward with the construction of the second train of the Abreu e Lima refinery in Pernambuco. It's an investment around 8 billion reais. And also there's the, in Rio de Janeiro State, the Boaventura Energy Complex with a 13 billion real capex. Will have like lubricant plant, a new lubricant plant, diesel and aviation kerosene production as well. Another section of our report that I should recall here is the energy transition area. Again, Petrobras is the highlight with the forecast to invest $16 billion, but this in a 5-year period between 25 and 29. Of course, it encompasses different areas, all the areas of business areas of the company. It has announced, for example, the construction of a green hydrogen plant. It's a pilot project, and it's increasing investments in biofuels, in biorefining. This is something that Petrobras is paying much attention now. To conclude, in terms of political risk, there are some concerns regarding the lack of adequate budget and personnel at regulatory bodies such as the ANP and IBAMA, which is the environmental regulator. In the National Congress, there is a proposal recommending that regulatory agencies, again, like the ANP, which is the oil and gas sector watchdog, be subject to oversight by committees of the lower house, which of course could threaten the autonomy of the regulatory agencies. And now I'm going to conclude effectively. There is a gas decree that was issued by the government in September this year that could heighten risk perception and drive away investments in the gas sector. For example, this decree gives power to the ANP to decide if the certain production project should reinject less gas. And we know that over 60% of the natural gas produced in Brazil is reinjected to recover more oil. There are problems as well related to the lack of infrastructure like gas pipelines and processing units, and uncertainties related to demand. So if the ANP decides that you have to reinject less gas and bring more gas to the market, this could put a project at risk. Mike?
Great, João. Thanks for that. A lot happening in Brazil, as always. Mark, what's happening in Mexico under the leadership of the new president, Claudia Sheinbaum? I think you might be in mute, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. As in Brazil, Mexico is dominated by its state-owned oil company, Pemex. But Pemex, under the previous government of López Obrador, had very different priorities to Petrobras in Brazil. López Obrador, AMLO, as everyone calls him, his main focus was on achieving self-sufficiency in fuels such as gasoline and diesel. So for the last 6 years of his government, Pemex invested heavily in refineries, most notably the Dos Bocas refinery at Olmeca, which was budgeted at $8 billion, and the latest estimate is 20 billion, and it's still not ready. So that's added to Pemex's debt. Although to be fair to the previous government, he's also pretty close to achieving self-sufficiency in gasoline. However, that's come at quite a cost to Pemex, and most analysts say it would have been better for Pemex to invest like Petrobras has invested, to put its capital into the upstream and generate cash flow to pay down its debt and create value for Mexico at large. But now, as you rightly say, we have a new government, a new president, Claudia Sheinbaum, who, although she is from the same party as López Obrador, she has very different energy priorities. She's a former climate scientist. She's a massive believer in energy transition, which is something that López Obrador didn't pay much attention to. And under her watch, she said that she wants to see Pemex become more of an energy company and less of just an oil and gas company. And what that means in practical day-to-day matters so far is not much. She's reduced her target, the target for Pemex's output, to 1.8 million barrels a day, which is more or less where it is today. So she's tacitly admitted that by diverting funds away from the upstream and towards the downstream, Pemex will be producing less oil and gas over the coming years. And that raises an interesting question. How are these new refineries like Dos Bocas and Deer Park, which Pemex bought in Texas, how are they going to be supplied? Pemex's own production of crude is declining quite rapidly. And some analysts also believe that by the end of the decade, Mexico could even become a net crude importer if the trend continues. Now, one obvious way out of that is to attract foreign investment into the Mexican upstream. But López Obrador burned a lot of bridges with the IOCs. So that's going to be a big ask. People in the oil industry you speak to off the record, they're very upset by what happened in Mexico. He canceled the bid rounds, and a lot of the big guys like Exxon, Chevron, essentially have left Mexico, and to bring them back is going to be a very big ask. So the main focus for 2025 will be on legislation which is expected to come out of the Sheinbaum government in the early months of next year, which will establish the conditions under which foreign companies, private companies in general, can invest in Mexico's upstream and get the country producing oil and gas in greater amounts. Specifically gas also. We haven't mentioned gas, but Mexico relies extremely heavily on the US for its natural gas. I think it's 70% of its natural gas comes from the US. And with Trump in charge of the US, that creates some worry about energy security, because there's no knowing what he might do when he's in office. Although he's obviously seen as a pro oil and gas figure, having 70% of your natural gas supply coming from a country with a, let's say, volatile head of state is beginning to cause some concern in Mexican energy circles. But having said that, let's just wrap up on a positive note, because there are a lot of LNG export projects in Mexico which rely on US gas. They're going to bring gas from the US, from the Permian Basin mainly, and export it to the mainly to Asia. And there's some, the biggest one is that there's a $14 billion project on the coast of Sinaloa, I believe. And yeah, 2025, we're hoping to see final investment decisions that'll make those a reality.
Great. Thanks for that insight, Mark. I think, as you mentioned, there seems to be a kind of a cautious optimism in Mexico. But aside from all the talk about the sector opening up again, there does seem to be a lot of concern regarding the industry. So an interesting 2025 awaits Mexico, no doubt. Thanks for that insight, Mark. Moving on to Alan. Alan, what do you see happening in Argentina in 2025 in the oil and gas sector?
Thanks, Mike. The big story, as everyone knows, next year will continue to be Vaca Muerta, shale oil, shale gas. But not obviously led by likes of YPF and Vista, but there's over the past several months there's been obviously a big shift as well towards midstream. A lot more discussion around midstream. There's quite a few projects that should advance next year. Let's just start with TGS, the midstream gas company. An auction's due to be held for its private initiative project. TGS will have first refusal. I think that involves expanding compression capacity of the first phase of the Vaca Muerta duct. So that's one to keep an eye on in terms of midstream. And obviously there's Vaca Muerta Sur, which is YPF's oil project, which involves dispatching Neuquén Basin gas to a new terminal off the coast of Rio Negro province. That should get underway very soon. And then obviously what everyone's talking about at the moment is LNG. Argentina's LNG prospects. There's several projects on the drawing board. I think the most advanced at the moment is Southern Energies. Pampa Energía has signed up for that, has jumped on board. Harbour Energy has jumped on board. There's talk about YPF becoming a partner. That's interesting because YPF has its own project, Argentina LNG. There's been quite a lot of changes or different proposals recently. For example, the original plan involved building an onshore liquefaction plant eventually. And based on what I've read in the local press, now that's kind of off the table. They're going to focus on floating units. So there's quite a lot up in the air, but there seems to be a lot of optimism. One thing to bear in mind is that the price of gas. For example, a former federal hydrocarbons chief, and who is now a lawmaker in Neuquén province, is concerned that the price of gas that's being demanded is too low, and that will impact royalties to the province of Neuquén. I'm talking about the LNG, the proposed LNG project. So that's something to watch again. Watch out for. Sorry. We should see very shortly the start of exports to Brazil through Bolivian infrastructure. That gas, of course, that follows the completion of the Gasoducto Norte reversal project. RIGI, there's a lot of projects starting to go into RIGI, the investment incentives regime. That's being led by local players, experienced local players, foreign players also, but I think the bulk of foreign players will come after the the midterm elections in August. Indeed, that's a political risk. It's there. Investors will be waiting to see how Milei's government, his lawmakers perform in his party perform in the midterm elections in August. That obviously there's poverty is high in Argentina. I believe it's something like 50%. He has support. He's still winning, still garnering support. But it'll be interesting to see what happens in the midterm elections, because that's after that we could see a lot more projects coming in, or vice versa. But it's just kind of, it's wait and see. And in a nutshell, I believe that's it. Vaca Muerta, the big story. Midstream projects, offshore exploration, and Shell has started offshore exploration in the Argentina Norte Basin. Yeah, there's a lot going on in Argentina. That's over to you, Mike.
There certainly is, Alan. Thanks for that insight. Moving on to David Casellas. David, what do you expect to see in the Andean countries of Bolivia, Peru, and Ecuador, as well as the Caribbean region, which of course is led by Guyana and Suriname?
Yeah, hi, Mike and team. Well, yeah, certainly 2025 is going to be an interesting year due to developments which occurred over this past year. You have Bolivia, for example, and Alan already made reference to that, which after Argentina closed its doors to Bolivian gas, is looking how to maintain its relevance in the regional gas market. To this end, Bolivia will act as a transport corridor for Argentine gas being dispatched to Brazil, and for which it will charge for the pipeline service. In Peru, the Energy and Mines Ministry just released its hydrocarbon resources report, which revealed a 34% jump in crude reserves, and which the ministry attributes to the reclassification of contingent resources to reserves because of the efforts to
I think we've lost David.
reactivate blocks 192 and Z1, and also new locations at block 95.
David, can you hear us? David.
I'm just sending a message to him.
Under their current government administration's new impetus was added to the oil and gas sector.
David.
And, oh, hola.
Hola, no te escuchamos, te perdimos. We lost you.
We lost you after basically you just started talking about Bolivia. You might have gone into Peru, and then we lost you, Dave.
Hello.
Hola.
Oh.
Let's maybe Daniela, you can edit this.
Yeah, I can edit.
Let's just try
I'm
one
so
more.
sorry. I remember, Mike, I told you that I'm using the cell phone hotspot.
Yeah, maybe we can try one more time, Dave, if you can start again. And if
he left.
Keep it really short, just in case. Maybe just try and condense everything into 1 or 2 minutes. And
Michael,
yeah,
David left.
he left. Okay.
Oh,
He left?
no. David, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Yeah. So Dave, let's just try again. Keep it really short, maybe to a couple of minutes. And if it still doesn't work, if you get cut off again, then I'll just read what you sent me.
Okay, yeah, sorry guys. I had mentioned to Mike that I've been having internet problems and I'm using the my cell phone's hotspot. So
If you can,
No
no
problem.
worries. If you can, just keep it really tight, just to minimize the risk that you'll get cut off again.
okay, just let me know when I can start.
Whenever you want, David.
Okay. Well, 2025 is going to prove an interesting year due to the developments which have occurred over the past year. Bolivia, for example, after Argentina closed its doors to Bolivian gas, plans to transport Argentine gas to Brazil via pipeline for which it will charge the service. Peru's Energy and Mines Ministry just released its hydrocarbon resources report, which revealed a 34% jump in crude reserves. And much of this can be attributed to the reactivation of blocks 192 and Z1, and also new locations at block 95, which is the country's largest oil producer. And in Ecuador, in particularly brought to the fore because of the country's energy crisis, natural gas is expected to be looked at more closely, especially for power generation. And there are plans on the front burner to seek private sector support to build out the Amistad offshore gas field. And well, over in Guyana and Suriname, the race continues to monetize hydrocarbon resources. The $10 billion fourth phase of the Starbrook development, dubbed Yellowtail, is expected to come on stream with the 250,000 barrel per day 1 Guyana FPSO. And finally, after final investment decision by Total Energies Block 58 in Suriname, which would be the country's first deep water crude producer, we should see more traction ahead of the first wells, but expected in 2026. But perhaps what's most important to highlight is that all these countries, except for Peru, are scheduled to have general elections in 2025. Under their current government administrations, Guyana and Suriname added new impetus to the growth of the oil and gas sector. And in the case of Guyana, the country has enjoyed windfall profit, making it one of the world's fastest growing economies. But not all are convinced, and there are calls for more transparency, public engagement, and oversight of the industry.
Excellent, David. Thank you very much for that insight on the Andean region and also the Caribbean. Moving on to Colombia, the sector in Colombia has basically
coupled with growing citizen demands for a larger piece of the oil wealth pie, and the pressure.
We've got a major delay with Dave. Let's just cut it off. I think we're okay,
Yeah,
Dave.
I can cut it off.
And I think you basically rounded everything off, so I think we'll be okay. Thanks for that, Dave. So, Daniela, I'm just going to go ahead and continue.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for that insight, David. Moving on to Colombia, where the sector has basically resigned itself to the fact that there will be no new oil and gas licensing rounds under this government, which still has a year and a half left in power. But that's not to say that there is no exploration activity going on in Colombia. There are still around 300 E&P contracts that are active in the country, spread among more than 60 companies. And several of these companies have outlined plans for onshore exploration next year, particularly focused on gas. These plans are led by the state-run company Ecopetrol, which is responsible for more than 60% of Colombia's oil and gas production. But they also include companies such as Frontera, Geopark, Gran Tierra, Parex, Canacol, and Hocol, which is a unit of Ecopetrol. As I mentioned, a major focus of this project is on gas reserves incorporating new gas reserves. Gas reserves in Colombia have fallen sharply in recent years. Demand has also risen quite evidently in all sectors, and there are expectations that there could be a gas deficit as soon as next year. So it's quite an urgent matter. One of the potential saviours for Colombia in this regard is the offshore segment, where Ecopetrol and several international majors are working to fast-track exploration and move forward with development plans. The flagship project, I guess, is the Sirius discovery, which was formerly known as Uchuva, and is part of the Gua Off-Zero block operated by Brazil's Petrobras. This area has estimated gas volumes of 6 trillion cubic feet, which is basically enough, if these reserves are certified, to triple the country's current proven reserves. Exploration has finished in the Sirius area, and the project has now moved on to the development phase. So, all eyes, I guess, in 2025 are on what the next steps will be towards getting first gas from that area. Production is expected to begin in 2029, which is a long way, I guess, when thinking about the fact that Colombia needs gas urgently. It seems like it's a long way away, but it's a massive project. Investments are estimated at more than $5 billion US dollars, around $5 billion US dollars, and there still is a lot that needs to be done in regards to environmental licenses and also the completion of infrastructure to bring that gas to shore. Moving on from Colombia, one of the major talking points in the region going into 2025 is how the US President-elect Donald Trump will tackle the issue of Venezuela and whether he will resume, I guess, his hardline stance that he adopted in the previous administration from 2016 to 2020. The nomination of Marco Rubio as his Secretary of State doesn't bode well for the sector in Venezuela. Rubio has been a harsh critic of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in the past, and also a vocal supporter of US sanctions in Venezuela, against Venezuela. So one of the companies affected could be Chevron, which currently has a special license to operate in Venezuela. That license expires in March, and there is uncertainty over whether Washington will renew that license. Chevron's possible departure also cast doubt over the individual licenses granted to companies such as Repsol, Eni, BP, and Trinidad's NGS, among other companies. So that's basically the lie of the land in Colombia and Venezuela. I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. Thanks to David, Alan, João, and Mark for your insights. Just a reminder to those watching that the BNamericas 2025 Oil and Gas Outlook Report is available to subscribers on our website and mobile app. We'd like to thank you for joining us, and we wish you a happy and safe end to the year, and we look forward to seeing you in 2025. For now, goodbye.